Ni hao and hello. My name is Dr. Nick Bowman. I'm an associate professor of journalism and creative media industries at Texas Tech. On behalf of myself and my colleagues at Zhongda, where I was also faculty last spring, we're going to present a translation paper where we looked at a Chinese language validation of an existing measure of video game demands. Our paper is published open access with the Proceedings of Chi 21, and our data and materials are freely available online using the link on your screen. The paper looks at interactivity on 5 different dimensions. We call it the interactivity as demand model. The first one is the cognitive demands of a game. This is the extent to which the game is, triggering us to solve its puzzles, solve its challenges and problems, engaging our cognitive faculties in a way that we can kind of sort through the game's environment and win the game, right? There's also emotional demands. When we're playing video games, especially those games with deeper narratives, more eudaimonic feelings, we have these sort of bottom-up and top-down emotional reactions that can be quite complex and can go far past, sort of rote hedonism, and we can assess those demands. We can look at the physical demands of a video game, and this one breaks down on 2 different dimensions, 2 different axes, and one of them is more discrete in nature. It refers to the controller in your hand, right? How natural or intuitive is the game's input system? But the other one is focused more on holistic demands. This is particularly relevant for systems in which gross motor skill is important, where the body is a controller. You might look at your average VR equipment. And of course, it also applies both ways. You can have a button masher where you have to put a lot of energy into the system. But the point is the physical demands are the extent to which the game is requiring us to give it physical input in some way. And then, of course, we have the social demands, right? We know that games are populated by social actors, whether they're human or non-human, and we do have, as humans, reactions to those characters at variably demanding levels. And so these 5 different demands are outlined in much more detail elsewhere, but they kind of lay the roadmap for what we're trying to assess with this video game demand scale. So in prior research with both English language and German language populations, we've been able to validate and replicate this 5-factor structure over and over again. The cognitive, emotional, exertional, controller, and social demands. These things vary reliably, and we've seen them in online surveys, streaming studies, VR gaming, and VR non-gaming applications. And so we wanted to know if this would replicate in a non-weird sample, a non-Western, sample in particular. With Taiwan, given the, Taiwan is a emerging and established game market. The primary language spoken is Mandarin Chinese, which is spoken by about 15% of the world's population. And we wanted to see if these different dimensions of demand would also hold up semantically and meaningfully in this new non-weird sample. We did our original CFA on the 26 items as constructed in previous work. It didn't quite hold up, but it had to do with some translation issues. There were a couple of items that were being read in ways we didn't expect. For example, some items about mental strain and mental exhaustion were being seen as physical or exertional exhaustion. So we stepped back, did a CFA and an EFA through a split half technique on our sample of nearly 1,000 respondents. And the short answer is that the 5-factor structure, once you take out those translation issues, holds up just fine. The paper goes into much more detail on this. We end up with a 22-item Mandarin Chinese language scale to assess these 5 demand factors. Even more exciting is that many of these held up. Right? So we saw that emotional, cognitive, and exertional demands predicted task load. We saw, for example, that controller demands predicted people's competence and their ratings of the controller. Emotional demands related with appreciating the game narratives. And you can go into much more detail in the paper, but the answer here is that we did our convergent and predictive and concurrent validity tests, and we found things that were related where they should be, and weren't related where they shouldn't be. And these were all tested using different structural equation models that are linked in the paper itself. So we're excited that these demands held up. They held up in a new language population. And then we went back to the HCI literature, and there are other folks working on similar work. So there's a group looking at player preferences for challenge, and there's another group looking at the perceptions of challenge post-play. And as you see, the cognitive elements, very emergent across all samples. The emotional elements the same way. And even some of the performative elements are there. And our next steps are to take our demand scale and see, for example, how the preferences map to the demands. We also focus on some things that were outside the game per se, such as the controllers and the social aspects that really haven't been tapped by other HCI work. So we're excited to see where this moves forward. Finally, I want to thank the Fulbright Association for sponsoring our research and invite anybody to reach out to us for more information. Thank you very much for your time. Go Tech.